to offer you this lesson from Unity of the Keys Spiritual Center.
So this Unity Church, like most Unity churches, began as a small group of dedicated students who wanted to improve their spiritual life and who were alive with these universal principles they were learning. And so they met in each other's homes and eventually attracted a Unity teacher by the name of Evelyn Casper, who had been a dedicated student of truth since 1960. And she so inspired this little band of people, which was about 6 people, and then grew to 12 people, that they wanted to become a full-blown church. And so she would drive 300 miles from her home in Miami every week to do a church service for this group. And sometimes even more than that. She would do classes, and they would do prayer studies and what's called mastermind prayer groups, where you take the principles similar to the 12 steps. Reverend Jack Boland initiated this process where you come together and you affirm and you pray and you affirm and you pray for each other in this very structured way. And so they did this, and here's the original mission statement, and then I'm going to read you the current mission statement and our core values. So back in the early 80s, Unity of the Keys held its first Sunday service. It was actually August 26th, 1984, and 12 people were in attendance. And they met in a chapel which belonged to a small Anglican church. So that's where this story begins. And this is what this group of people decided was their mission. Spreading the universal principles of practical Christianity as taught and practiced by Jesus Christ. Recognizing the value of individuals exactly as they are, and with loving acceptance, enable them to change their lives through unity truths of joy, freedom, wholeness, and prosperity. Teaching, preaching, perfecting, and healing, as Jesus did, to lift the world to higher spiritual awareness, one person at a time. Do you love that? I love that one. Acknowledge the value of all people and refraining from placing any blocks of disapproval, prejudice, condemnation, or intolerance in the paths of others. Do you like that one too? Acknowledging the value of every single person and refraining from placing any block in their way. On undergirding, this is an old word, undergirding all we do with prayer. One of my friends had a very strict mother, and one of the things he always used to say about her was, "Gird your loins, my mom's coming." She was the mama bear of our neighborhood. We're like, what am I doing wrong? Am I doing anything wrong? She's coming. And then last, saluting. I like this. Saluting Jesus Christ as the head of our church and soliciting his guidance and direction in all of our affairs. So this is the very beautiful mission statement of the church that is Unity of the Keys, that was co-created by this small group of people and our founding minister, Reverend Evelyn Casper. In contrast, you want to hear our mission statement now? Unity of the Keys is a spiritual community celebrating our oneness with God. That's it. Does that say it for you? I like to add oneness with God and each other. Because I guess God includes all of us, right? But I think it's important, especially right now, to remind ourselves that it's each other too. And we have a vision statement, we see humanity awake to its divinity, fully experiencing love, peace, and abundance. So this group of people made a decision. They made a commitment. They were of one mind. We're going to be a light to our community of Key West, and we are going to expand the consciousness of our city and our world. And they met when they got ousted out of the Anglican group's home in the breezeway of someone's office. It did not deter them. In one of the child care rooms of the Wesley House, it did not deter them. And they finally secured a storefront on Duck Avenue. How many of you were there? I was there. Some of you may not know that I used to come down to the Keys and stay at Sugarloaf Lodge and visit my teacher, Sugar, who I used to tell people, if you don't hear from me again, it's because I'm at the fins of my master. I'd always wanted to live in the Keys. What could be bad about having a dolphin friend and a friend like Reverend Evelyn? And Duck Avenue was a trip. When it was first rented, it was one big pocked-floored room that used to be a ballet studio. And the community just bought chairs at the Kmart and moved on in and began cleaning and redesigning and improving the space to meet their needs, as is the tradition of this community. Like the Boy Scouts, we make everything better than when we came, right? Don't you love that? I've had Boy Scouts sleep in our church before, and I love that motto. They're like, what can we do to make this church better? You know, it was cleaner after they left. It was amazing. So I think that's a spirit here too. We're always renovating, always getting new ideas for change and redesign and improving our space. And with that kind of commitment and that kind of attitude, this small group of people, which swelled to the 20s and 30s, eventually was able to rent more space for a bookstore and an office at Duck Avenue. And then, after just a few years of being together, on December 31st, 1986, how many of you remember where you were? Did you participate in the World Instant of Cooperation? So there was this movement in 1986. I was at Unity of the Palm Beaches. We could not contain ourselves to one event. We spent a whole year doing what we called celebrations of world peace with hundreds of people that would show up on a Wednesday night just to pray and sing and dance and be together and do this healing meditation. So this community hosted its first big event that day. December 31st, 1986, this community hosted the World Instant of Cooperation on Higgs Beach, or Smathers? On Smathers Beach, I think. 200 people came. 200 Key West people came and made a giant circle and prayed this prayer. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. Now is the time of the new beginning. And you and I are co-creators with God. And it is a new heaven that comes as the good of God comes to this earth through me and you. You are my holy self. You and I are one. So this is just a piece of the World Healing Meditation that was written by John and Jan Randolph Price, and that people have been saying together simultaneously all over the world on the eve of the new year since 1986. It was a huge revelation at that time that simultaneous positive thinking would have an impact on the world. We have scientific evidence now that that's true, right? We have so much evidence that when people come together to pray for the good of something, not only does it inevitably create that reality, but it also heals every single person in some way that prays for that. So that's the beginnings of Unity of the Keys. Unity of the Keys, we could say, began with prayer, was fueled by prayer, and continues to have at its very core affirmative prayer and silent meditation. So it was 33 years ago, on December 19th, 1987. Well, actually, I should say this one first. On February 19th, 1987, Unity of the Keys was officially incorporated as a spiritual business in the state of Florida. But then after that December, on December 19th, 1987, we became a church. 33 people, 33 years ago, 33 official charter members were received into Unity of the Keys by Reverend Alan Stanley of Miami, including the spiritual leader and founding minister, who is still a licensed Unity teacher, Reverend Evelyn Casper. And they were no longer a study group, but they were a full status church, and they became a member of what was then called the Association of Unity Churches, which is now called Unity Worldwide Ministries. And then a year later, Reverend Evelyn Casper was ordained a Unity minister, and the group celebrated its 4th year. And for a decade, the congregation met in storefronts and small churches until purchasing a church that they had their eye on that prize for years. They wanted that church. And finally, in 1998, they purchased 909 Flagler Drive for about $500,000, I think. Anybody here at that time that was part of that? Do you want to say anything about that time period? Because I wasn't here. Anybody want to say anything about Flagler Drive? Flagler Avenue. Anybody want to say anything about Flagler Avenue? Lenny, you want to? Come on down.
I'll make a comment on Flagler Avenue.
All right.
We used to have the 24-hour prayer session, and I would come in with my old black dog.
You used to
And
have
I would
24
24-hour. I didn't do 24-hour, but we would have like a 4-hour block or 2-hour block. Me and Josie, my big old black dog, were sitting in the back of the church between the hours of like 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the morning, and we would sit in the back of the church.
Aww.
And I thought it was pretty cool. And we used to have a guy who was an ex-Marine, hated the military, ex-Marine, who was our preacher. I don't know if you remember. I would be there always by myself and him, and we would decorate the church and everything else. That's what I remember most.
Was that Reverend Phil?
No, it wasn't Phil.
Oh,
David,
Flores.
David, yeah.
Oh, very cool. I didn't know he was an ex-military.
I remember that we had a labyrinth. Yeah, I mean, it was just a really powerful presence for a space that ended up not being our church because of the hurricane.
So say the next thing that happened was the roof blew off during Irma. Was that it?
Wilma, and so we lost the church, but in that space we created a beautiful labyrinth.
That's amazing.
And it was just
That's so symbolic.
I so miss that labyrinth when we had to leave that space.
Well, name it and claim it. Well, we'll have to see another labyrinth somewhere coming into manifestation. Okay, more about Flagler Avenue.
Our board had a retreat, and the main question that they prayed on was, this building on Flagler is made out of corrugated cardboard with sheets of aluminum siding on the inside and the outside. So structurally, it couldn't handle putting the bookstore where we needed to have it. So instead, you had to go all the way up to the front and make a left, and there was a hidden bookstore off to the left. It was a very unusable space for those of us who remember it, but a lovely space to have compared to being across from a honky-tonk bar and, Duck Avenue. So it was a step up, but still, the building itself wasn't giving us what we needed. The meditation was, the prayer was, looking for guidance. What are we going to do about this building doesn't fulfill our needs? Perhaps Perhaps the answer was Hurricane Wilma blew it down the next week.
The next week. Oh my goodness. So you're saying you prayed before the hurricane and then the hurricane came. Wow. Hey. Watch that.
We had a bell choir. We had wonderful bells. The music was always great at Unity. Yeah. And I used to teach Sunday school.
You did? You used to teach Sunday school? That's amazing. Yeah, I heard there was a bell choir and a 40-member choir, and that's later though.
Yeah, speaking about the
Right in the beginning?
the layout of the church was kind of like a T, and so we had chairs that were facing this way and chairs that were facing this way. And in the right was that beautiful dove that we're looking at up there. Thank you. And
Aw. Who did the dove?
so,
Thank you, Bob.
yeah, where did you get that, Bob?
There was a fundraising seminar. We were going out there to learn how to raise funds. And there was a fundraising seminar that was going to teach you how to raise funds at Unity Village. And one of the ways they done it was with auctions. And this was on the auction block. Demi Castellanos paid $2,500 for it, and I had it shipped here. And we just put it up when we got this building. I had it in storage at my place for quite a few years till we got this.
All right, let me say a few more facts because I'm getting confused myself. Trying to write this history was one of the most interesting things I've ever done, and I'm a pretty good historian. Okay, so the church membership grew at 909 Flagler Avenue, and Sunday attendance there was regularly over 100 people. And then towards the 2000s, you went to 2 services, and there were, when Reverend Evelyn retired, 150 people in attendance at 2 services with a choir of 40 people, a bell choir, and a combination instrumental group. And Reverend Evelyn had begun an outreach in Marathon on Sunday evenings at 7 o'clock. And then the hurricane, right? And then there were a series of different ministers. I'm just going to name them all, and then I'm going to ask for Debris to speak a little bit because we're running out of time. So there was a person by the name of Sue Ellen with a question mark. Reverend Evelyn said was here for a few months. And then there was Reverend Angela, and there was a music director by the name of Laura that kind of didn't get along very well. And Reverend Angela was here in September 2000 for just such a short amount of time, no one seems to know. But then in December 2000 to March 2002, the board hired, does anyone know the name of this minister? Yes. Reverend, I'm so happy to hear that. Reverend Betty Hours as the temporary minister. Well, they searched for a new minister, and then they brought in Reverend David Florence, who was hired and served as the minister of Unity of the Keys from 2002 to 2008. Then interim minister Reverend Mary Lou Palmer was here while you got this facility. She, on January 27th, 2008, directed the board to purchase the current building pending the sale of 909 Flagler Drive. Then Reverend Phil and Laura Smedstead were here from 2009 to 2015. And you were without a minister for a couple of years until you recruited the Reverend Debris Toms, who is here from 2016 to 2017. Please come up and share with us anything you want about Unity of the Keys.
Hi. Hi.
Welcome back.
Sometimes it's all about timing. And you all were without a minister for a couple of years there. And the board was worn out. They were tired. Many of you were tired. You'd been carrying the church for a long time. And here I was, right out of seminary, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Couldn't wait couldn't wait to get going. And you accepted Denny and I with all of our rough edges and our newness and our enthusiasm and said, come play. I don't believe I was ever told no about anything. I'd say, let's try this. And they'd be like, yeah, go for it. It was awesome. It was such a beautiful, I know we joked when I left about you always remember your first. Okay. You were my first church. And you showed me what a healthy congregation looked like. You showed me what a board looked like that could work together in harmony, that could disagree about things, that could bring their disagreements to the table with respect for one another, and who could leave that space in harmony. You set the standard for me as a minister of what a church community should look like. And I'll tell you what, it's been very hard to find another community to meet that standard. This community has always had a unity minister other than some little interim times, and so you are so steeped in what unity is. And you made it very clear to me that when I came here, that's what you wanted to see continued. And I find that that's kind of unique, because there's not enough unity ministers to go around. And so you find communities that they're not even sure what unity is. It's been so long since they've had a unity minister. But I will be forever grateful for you allowing me for this to be my spiritual playground, because that's what I believe every unity church should be, a spiritual playground for every single person who's there, to be empowered to do whatever you see as your next thing to do. And you all were and are so fearless and so willing to stretch those wings and to try new things. And every congregation is we're a microcosm of the macrocosm. Whatever's going on out there, whatever conflict and personalities are going out there, we're going to find within a church community. But it's when we recognize that we are one and that we can come together, even with all of our personalities, and find that common ground with love. And there's no limit. There's no limit to what we can do. I honor you. I bless you, and I will forever love you. You're awesome.
Divine order. So we didn't plan this. Debri just happened to be in town. I had planned to do this talk, months and months ago. So I say divine order. So you were here for how long before the hurricane, Debri? A year. Yeah, so Debri was here for a year, and then a hurricane came through and transformed your lives, many of you, and transformed this ministry. And it was, traumatic. We have to say that. No matter where you were or what was going on with you personally, whether it affected your own particular home, natural disasters are traumatic. And some people are still homeless. Some people that I know, just having been here almost a year, have never really recovered. And there's a joke I know now in Key West that you're renovating, which means like you're, this perpetual thing you're trying to do. Some people have been doing it for years because it's hard to get really good help here in Key West to do what it is that you need to be done, especially when there's so much demand. So the ministry that I came into was also very tired and exhausted. And I was tired and exhausted. I've been a minister for, I don't know how many years actually, but I would say at least 30. before I was ordained, was the assistant minister to Hal and Lassie Rosencrantz at Unity of the Palm Beaches during the last of their ministry of 45 years. And at that point, we had thousands of members. We had a sanctuary that had 777 seats and 3 services. Yeah. And I was joking with Reverend Evelyn yesterday. She said, we had a really big event with Reverend Michael Rice, a well-known Unity minister. And I had to laugh to myself because Michael Rice and I were neighbors when we started to study the Course in Miracles at Coral Springs, Florida in the early 80s. We were just people in a neighborhood, a suburb of Fort Lauderdale, And then later, we studied with Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut at Unity of the Palm Beaches. He would teach on Wednesday nights. We'd travel up there together, study the Course in Miracles with the astronaut Edgar Mitchell. And then the late, great Michael Rice went on to do some pretty amazing things. But life is like that. It's cyclical. Like a seed, our individual lives and our community lives give birth to something, and then it dies, and then it is reborn, and it dies, and it's reborn. It goes through all stages of growth, from the excitement of a sprout, to the beauty of a flower, to the death of that flower, to this reseeding of that rose bush. When I was in Oroville, the reason that I got the place I lived in Oroville, this amazing historic home with redwood floors, and it was the most amazing thing for $600 a month, because the landlord was a friend of a friend, and I had just come back from Scotland, and I wanted to landscape, like I just had to landscape. And this house had been completely trashed, and it was in his family. I go, let me do your landscape. And so I unearthed all these rose bushes that were heritage roses that people didn't even know were there because they were covered with ivy. And then I just went with what was there, and it was very healing for me. And then when we got done, he was doing the inside, I was doing the outside. He said, so when are you going to move in? I go, what do you mean? He goes, I want you to live here. He said, I'm not renting it to anyone else. I go, really? He goes, yeah. I go, how much? He goes, $600 a month. So 3 acres in Northern California and a historic home for $600 a month. It came through the giving, through the seeding, through the mutual, as I give, as I receive. And I think that is so much of what happens in life, that when you're in your perfect place, regardless of what it looks like in the outer, if you just do good where you are, then you will be blessed and your next step will be revealed. So let's join in celebrating the achievements of Unity of the Keys and our constant reflowering, like our country, in the midst of incredible challenges, in the midst of incredible setbacks. We are moving forward. Like General Patton said, I don't know the direction, but I know I'm moving forward.